Let's go live back to Canberra now. Joining me live, as he does every Monday, the Nationals leader, David Littleproud. David, thanks so much for your time. First of all, have you spoken to Barnaby? Is his job safe?
Yeah, look, I've spoken to Barnaby a couple of times over the weekend, and this is about making sure he's okay. He's acknowledged this isn't normal behaviour, and there's some personal circumstances, some of which he's articulated publicly, others that I don't intend to breach his confidence. And what our job is to make sure that we put an environment around him that he's okay and he gets the support he needs. He's an important part of our team, and we'll make sure that he gets the support that he's required to ensure that he can continue to contribute.
And he is okay, and has he been contributing? Or is this, an unusual outlier event?
Yeah, it was, and I think even Barnaby acknowledges that, and the fact that there were prescriptions that obviously mixed with alcohol, but there's other matters that Barnaby needs to work through, and as I've said, we're working with him, and I'm sure he'll be back either this afternoon or sometime during the week, is the plan. And that's about making sure that we understand the circumstances on which this has happened. This is something that he's deeply embarrassed about, and he's made that very clear, that this isn't normal behaviour that he undertakes, and there are extenuating circumstances surrounding that, and obviously we'll support him in making sure that anything that he does need, he gets.
I know you're not going to breach his confidence, but you say there are other issues that he needs to work through. Can you say that these issues are not stopping him from doing his job?
Oh, totally. And I'll have another conversation with Barnaby when he gets back to Canberra to make sure about where he's sitting and where his head is in terms of making a contribution, not just to this parliament, but to the people in New England. And I think he's shown that even in his public statements subsequent, that he still has a passion to represent the people in New England. So he'll obviously be working hard at that and reinforcing all that he's achieved for the people in New England. Okay,
but he's okay?
Yeah, he is good, and we hope to even see him this afternoon.
Oh, okay, nice one. Well, let's get on to some other issues. Coles leaning on suppliers to stop charging as much. What do you think about this? Wouldn't this affect farmers?
Well, they're saying outside of food, but would you trust Coles to pass that back to the consumer? I mean, Coles and Woolworths have got real form on this, and not just recently, but even as far back as the pandemic. We exposed that. The Nationals are the ones that over Christmas and New Year exposed the fact that they didn't adjust their meat prices, despite the fact that they'd fallen at the farm gate by 60, 70%. They'd only reduced it by 8%. And that was as far back as June. And then you look at fresh produce. The government's been asleep at the wheel. I wrote to the government over 12 months ago in a bipartisan way to say, let's bring forward new reforms that would put greater scrutiny and greater penalties on the supermarkets to have fair, transparent pricing from the farm gate to your plate. That's common sense, and these supermarkets have been gouging. And I think Alan Fells even validated the Nationals' position last week with his report that we've been calling for more ACCC investigations, not parliamentary ones, because the ACCC have the power to compel evidence and compel documents that would be able to demonstrate that. But we also need to give them more powers, and the Nationals have been saying for a long time, it's time for the divestiture of powers, and Alan Fells agrees. And I think you'll see that there'll be a conga line of former ACCC chairs that are saying they need more power and they need to be given the teeth and the resources to hold supermarkets out, because they hold 74% of the marketplace. That is the marketplace. When you look at the big chains in the United States, the three big chains in the United States control about 34% of the market. But we've got to continue to increase competition. But until we get that competition, we've got to have good regulatory frameworks around them. And that's what the Nationals have been saying. I offered it to the Prime Ministers and to the government, but they obviously ignored me. And now they realise that cost of living's a real problem for them. They're now saying, well, we'll have a parliamentary inquiry. Well, it's time to have real penalties as well.
Okay, we'll see what happens this week. Of course, there's still a lot of talk about not only the right to disconnect laws, but negative gearing. I don't know whether you caught any of my conversation with the Greens Senator just a couple of moments ago, but essentially the Greens making the argument, well, Labor said when circumstances change, they change. Circumstances have changed, so look at negative gearing.
Well, let me just say this is all about supply. And there's abject failure from state and local governments in planning properly over the last decade plus in making sure supply increases. And I find it a bit hypocritical for the Greens, and particularly Max in particular, who actually stands at protests in front of developments of increased density housing in his own electorate. He's actually putting a handbrake on the expansion of more housing in his own electorate. And so you take it with a grain of salt. And I think you've got to be very careful playing with negative gearing, because obviously those properties are rented out. And if you increase supply, not everyone can afford to actually go and buy a place. So I think you got to work through this in a sensible, methodical way. There's Australians that won't ever be able to afford a mortgage, unfortunately. And unless we increase supply, that's where we've got to focus on. We've got to increase supply and have that real conversation about housing density. And I think in some states they are. Credit where credit's due. I think Chris Minns has been prepared to have that. Yeah, good on him. We've got to be bold enough to have that conversation, because otherwise you're going to tear away your food security by tearing up prime agricultural land, and that'll drive up your food prices. That's the conversation that state premiers got to be prepared to have.
All right, we'll check in with you soon. Thanks so much.